Welcome to Keep What You Earn, your judgment and jargon-free zone for entrepreneurs of all levels. Get ready to learn how to scale your business, save money in taxes, and create a business that grows your wealth. If it feels like the financial side of business is like eating your vegetables, well then think of this podcast as the ranch dressing to make the process a little more enjoyable. My name is Shannon Weinstein. I'm a CPA and business owner on a mission to simplify money and empower others through knowledge. I hope this episode inspires you to take action, but remember that the information we share is for educational purposes only and is not individual tax advice. Now that we got that out of the way, let's start the show. When it comes to unfamiliar topics, we often hold ourselves back from being open to learning because we either attach an identity to it, like I'm not a numbers person, or we simply avoid hoping that someone's going to sweep us off our feet and take care of it for us. And unfortunately, both of these approaches can lead to a disaster if you don't take at least some ownership of your learning. Today, we're going to talk about the basic steps that will help you learn how to invest your money and begin your wealth building journey with Tess Waresmith. Now, Tess is a financial coach, and she's the founder of Wealth with Tess, which is a financial education platform that helps corporate women and entrepreneurs in their 30s and 40s and beyond learn how to grow their money using simple investing strategies so they can have the financial independence to retire comfortably, chase their dreams, and live life on their terms. So here's an interesting fact about Tess. She lost $80,000 in bad investments in her 20s. She learned everything she could about wealth building after that, and then built up her net worth to over $1 million as a single 35-year-old woman. This is somebody who perhaps identified. She actually tells us about her career as a circus performer, believe it or not, in the episode. And this is somebody who has every excuse in the book to say, I'm not a numbers person. Somebody who could have easily fallen back on, well, that's really not my cup of tea, not my forte, right? But here she is investing in the growth, investing in the learning, and here she is sharing it with you all. So without further ado, let's hear from Tess. Hey, Tess, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Shannon. I love your show. I love the quick tips. I have learned a lot, so I am very excited to be here.
And I am excited to meet another person who shares my affinity for fitness and finance at the same level. It's so awesome because I started Fitnancial thinking I was the biggest weirdo on the planet that loved equal parts fitness and money. And I found somebody else who does too, you guys.
I have looked at so many domains. Like I was devastated when the fitness gym was taken. I think that was the first one I looked at. So yes, I am. They're both important, and there's a lot of similarities and metaphors between fitness and finance. So I think it's really valuable to talk about both of them.
Yeah, and if you're a listener to this show, that you're no stranger to all those analogies that I use all the time. But before we dive in, Tess, introduce yourself to everybody listening. Let them know who you are.
Awesome. Well, it's so nice to meet you all. My name is Tess. I'm a financial coach, and I help women in their 30s and 40s learn how to grow their money using super simple investing strategies anyone can do, even if they're short on time or a total newbie to investing. And I do that through small group coaching programs and a no judgment, no financial jargon zone. So Shannon and I share that goal to demystify some of the jargon.
Awesome. Yeah. And that's exactly what we're here for too, is the judgment and jargon-free zone. And it's just such a fun environment to be able to support women, especially women, but all business owners, all entrepreneurs using a more simplified approach. But one of the things I always hear too, Tess, is, one of the reasons why people need a simplified approach is they identify with this stigma, this label saying, I'm really bad at money. Like I'm not a money person. I'm not a numbers person. Let's talk about that and your reaction to that and what people can do to kind of overcome that mentality.
Yeah, so I think I'll start by saying that I felt like I wasn't a numbers person and that I was bad at math. I didn't grow up with a financial education. My first job out of college was as a circus performer, like an aerial acrobat. Like I do not have a background in finance. And what I realized through a really bad investing mistake that I'm happy to share that I lost a lot of money in is that the basics of investing, the basics of personal finance are not nearly as challenging as we think. And so we think when we don't understand it that we're bad at money. But just like anything else, it's a skill that can be learned. It's a language. There's some jargon. You have to understand and find a definition that works for you. But once you learn the definitions of a lot of these things, it does not become that complicated. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're somebody that cares about your money, that wants to keep more of what you earn, that is probably trying to grow a business or do something in your career that's meaningful. I guarantee you've done a lot harder things in your life and you've learned a lot more challenging skills than the basics of managing your money that you work so hard for and learning how to invest. So there are so many reasons why we have those mental blocks around learning the basics of personal finance. But at the end of the day, if you're somebody who's listening to this that says like, yeah, I'm bad at money or, I can't learn how to invest, I would challenge you right back and say, but how much time have you actually spent learning those things? Because I made a lot of mistakes and I didn't understand it. Yep. And then after I lost a lot of money with, doing it the wrong way, I learned the basics and I thought, wow, this is not nearly as complicated as I thought. And that's why I do what I do now, because I feel like I have a moral obligation to make sure that I help as many people as possible avoid the money mistakes I made. Because with a super simple basic education, I'm talking about a few weeks of intentional effort, you can learn how to grow your money and save yourself a lot of money really quickly.
I totally agree. And I'll add to that to say a lot of the times that it's not the subject, it's the teacher. A lot of our favorite subjects in school were because we had really good teachers. Like, I feel like I would have a completely different career if I had really good science teachers or really good English teachers. Not that I didn't, but I just didn't connect with them. Like, I didn't really resonate with them as like their style, their communication. And I think for a lot of folks, it's very challenging to learn from people who are experts in finance and money because they do tend to talk above us. They do tend to, use a lot of jargon and attempt to sound intelligent, whether they intend to or not. And I think that's a lot of the intimidation factor is like, it doesn't feel like a welcoming discipline to learn because of who's teaching it sometimes. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. And the financial industry itself isn't really set up to support education like that. And I think that's a real shame. First of all, we don't learn it in high school or college, right? So we don't get any exposure to it. But even when we do get exposure, whether it's through a financial advisor or a family or a friend or something like that, it's not always shared in a way that makes sense. And I also think there's a lot of gatekeeping too. I've worked with a lot of clients that have financial advisors. And by the way, I'm happy to share my story of how I lost some money working with a financial advisor. I am not anti-financial advisor. There's amazing financial advisors out there. I'll say that. But it is important for everyone to learn the basics so that you can make sure you're working with someone really good. And so what I've learned throughout working with hundreds of women now in their 30s and 40s, a lot of them have come to me and said, I have a financial advisor. I don't know what they're doing. And every time I ask questions, I get answers like, you don't really need to know that, or that's not important for you. And that to me says two things. One, this person is intentionally trying to gatekeep, or two, they don't have the skills to explain it in a way that's digestible. And so we need to do a better job of training financial advisors on how to talk to people. But you're right, Shannon, at the end of the day, it does come down to the teacher and how you're explaining it. And so I always set this up at the beginning of any of my small group coaching calls. I always say the entire purpose of this program is to help demystify this language and to help you come up with a definition that you can understand so that as you move through life, when you hear these words, you know exactly what they mean. And so if I say a word, you get to yell at me and say, you didn't explain what that meant. And so I set that precedent right away. So every time I say a financial word, I'll stop and try to say, this is what that means, and make sure that everyone understands the definition. Yep. And we have to do that because there's so many words and we don't use them in our day-to-day vocabulary. But again, once you understand the basic definitions, it all becomes very clear and it's not as challenging as you think, but you have to have a good teacher.
100%, 100%. And it's so important to like open yourself up to getting the help that you need. So what I want to do is like a two-pronged question. One is I would like you to tell your story about what happened, but also my next question was going to be something along the lines of, what do you say to people who basically hand over the control, hand over the keys and say, I want a professional to take care of this because I don't know what I don't know. I'm not the expert. I'm going to relinquish all the control to the professional because, hey, isn't that what I pay them for? And don't they know better than I do? I would love your reaction to that while also telling your story. And maybe those are intertwined. I'm going to find out.
Yeah, they are absolutely intertwined. So what happened to me was, as you know now that I was a circus performer after I graduated from college, I actually graduated into a recession in the subprime mortgage crisis. So like many people my age, I couldn't find a job. And
Same.
yeah. And so I had been a springboard diver my whole life. That's why I'm still very interested in fitness and have done all kinds of stuff since then. I couldn't find a job. And so my old diving coach said, hey, there's a job diving on cruise ships in a Cirque du Soleil show. And I thought that was crazy because I had just graduated and I thought it was a big deal with my degree. And then I couldn't find a job. So I sheepishly said, of course, I'll go dive on the cruise ship in a show. So the reason why that is important and has anything to do with finances at all is because it gave me a huge opportunity to save money because I was living on the cruise ship. I didn't have to pay for accommodations. I didn't have to pay for food. And that was a really big deal to me because I grew up with a super scarcity mindset. My mother always said, we don't have enough money for that. My father still is a few months behind on their mortgage payment. So I really early on knew that it was really important for me to understand how to grow my money or at least make sure I was being responsible. And so after I made some money and saved money, I tried to learn a little bit about investing. And the book I picked up was, about trading stocks, and it was very complicated. And I thought, just like you just said, I want to be responsible and find someone who's an expert. And so I gave all my money to them and just kind of said, make it be more. So then after a few years, I started investing in real estate, actually. And that made me much more interested in what my investments were doing in the stock market. So I kind of went back to my financial advisor and I started asking a lot of questions. And I didn't really understand the answers I was getting. I was also very skeptical of a financial product that I had been sold, which was an annuity, which I found out later was better suited for somebody in their 50s, not in their late 20s, which I was at the time. And so what I ended up discovering is that not only was the financial advisor charging outrageous fees, so I was paying 1% in fees for the management of my money, I was paying for very high fees in the actual investments themselves. I was also paying an administrative fee for use of the platform itself that they ran their investments through. I was also investing in an annuity. Investing, I use that in quotes, paying for a financial product, an annuity, which is basically like a contract with an insurance company to pay you a fixed amount, usually later in your life. It's like creating your own pension. And so all in, tens of thousands of dollars I lost in fees. I lost access to that money in the annuity, which at that time in my life, if I had just invested that in a very simple investment in the stock market, I would probably have hundreds of thousands more in retirement versus maybe the $50,000 I'll get from that initial quote investment that I put into that annuity. And once I figured this all out, I was devastated and I had a ton of shame because the whole reason I had done this, to circle back to your question, Shannon, was because I wanted to be responsible and I wanted to find somebody to take care of my money. And I thought that I was not smart enough to do that on my own. And so I lost tens of thousands of dollars and I did, after I eventually picked myself off the floor and stopped crying about it, I eventually learned everything I could about investing. And that's when I realized that it's not as complicated to understand as I thought. And that getting a basic education could, one, mean that you either learn how to invest on your own, or two, you're able to have really intelligent conversations with a financial advisor. And that will allow you to make really smart choices of who helps you. And it's the same with any financial field. If you're looking for, we were just talking about this before we hopped on, if you're looking for a CPA, if you don't understand the basics of what you might need from a tax perspective, you're just going to go out and find any accountant and think that's good enough for you. And that person might not have the expertise to really support you. And it's the same with your investing. So what I would say to somebody that says, I'm not an expert, I just want to hand over my stuff and have somebody else do it for me because they're educated in that, I would say you can't possibly make an educated decision on who the best person is to support you in that goal unless you have a basic understanding of what you need and a basic understanding of how the stock market works, which anyone can learn. So, it's interesting. Like, we talk about other things like when you go to get your car fixed and you go to the mechanic, one of the hardest things about that is most of us don't know how to vet a mechanic, which is why you hear so many stories of people losing money because they bring their car in and all of a sudden they're getting all this stuff fixed. And you're like, do I really need that? That's not a great situation, right? But that's a fixed amount of money. Like, you're only going to have so many repairs on your car. If you do the same thing, you go to your neighborhood financial advisor and you don't know what they're doing, that's your money. You work 40 plus hours a week for that. You owe it to yourself to have a basic education so that you can find somebody that's really going to help you. So that's my answer to your question, Shannon. I would say that even if you don't want to manage it yourself, it is your responsibility to understand enough so that you can find somebody that's really good and that is going to support you specifically in the unique place you are in life.
Yeah. And I always say that even though it is our, decree, our vow, our whatever it is, our promise to you as our client that we're going to take care of what you need for your money and act in your best interest, we will never care as much as you do. We will never care as much as you do about your own money because you attach very different value, emotions, everything to that money. I look at certain dollars in my bank account and I think that's from when I got a bonus at work, or that's from when I sold my house. And that's from when I actually look at that and go, it's money from. I see the source of the money and I think about what it took to earn that or to generate it. And everybody has a different way they view money. So if you're going to be relinquishing control, you have to be really careful about finding someone with a good equal risk tolerance, I would say, and somebody who will respect it and make sure that they're in alignment with your goals and understand what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, so important. And the other thing I would add to that is that getting this basic education so you can understand who to find, that doesn't take months or years or economics degrees. It takes a little bit of thoughtful education. So you can do that by, if you're wanting to learn more about taxes, listen to Shannon's podcast, and then you would learn a lot and you'd be way more informed to find the right person that's going to help you. So subscribe and keep listening to this podcast. But then in the same way, when it comes to your finances, you can learn the basics of investing in a matter of weeks. Like my small group coaching program, where I take women from knowing nothing to learning how to set up their own basic, simple portfolios if they want to. That whole thing takes 4 weeks. Are they an expert? Are they ready to trade on Wall Street? No, but you shouldn't do that anyway because people that trade stocks usually lose money. So we do that in a matter of weeks, in like 1 to 2 hours a week. And all of those people learn a lot because they're committed and they've realized that, just like you said, Shannon, they are the only person that can, one, guarantee their financial independence, but two, that cares about their money. Of course, financial professionals care about you and your money, but I could not agree with you more that no one cares about your money more than you do. And so once you realize that, and once that message gets into your head, then you're going to be a lot more thoughtful with the decisions you're making and how you hand your money over to other people. And that's what you're doing. When you hire any financial person, you're handing your money and your future over to them. So you better have a basic understanding of what you need because that's your future. That's your retirement. That's your business. That's whatever it is. So I couldn't agree more. It's so important to understand the basics so that you can find somebody that's a good fit for you and that's really going to help you. But the only way you can do that is if you learn yourself.
Agreed. And educate yourself on what good looks like and what you're looking for. But on that note, right, learning the basics. So let's spend some time with our listeners now and actually teach them some of the basics. So let's go through maybe one of the pillars. Maybe it's something you cover in week 1 of your program, or maybe it's something that you give an overview of the key things you do over the 4 weeks and the key concepts you're teaching. Something that we can leave listeners with that will help them go, wow, I feel like I just got like a 101 crash course in the basics of investing, even from a conceptual level. What would you say to someone looking for that advice?
Absolutely. So what I will walk through right now, super high level, are the 4 steps I would take to learn about investing, and I would do it in this order. And this is what I take my students through in our 4-week small group coaching program. And I also have a free guide, Shannon, that I'm happy to share. It's called the Savvy Investor Starter Pack, and that walks through these 4 steps in a little bit more detail so that you can have an action step from this conversation. So if you're listening to this and you're excited to start investing or do something, that guide is free and that'll be in the show notes. And I'll give you the high level of how we do this. So the first week is really about getting your money mindset right. Now, that is a very trendy term. You hear that a lot in different spaces, especially on Instagram. But to me, money mindset is making sure that you are addressing any blockers that could potentially prevent you from growing your money, whether that's in your job, whether that's in your business. So are there areas that you are preventing yourself from making money? Or are there places where you're spending more money than you need to? I am not into extreme budgeting, by the way. There are ways to enjoy your life and to spend money on things that you care about while also being financially responsible. Those things are not mutually exclusive, but that is week one, is really about your money mindset. And the other component of that is setting some goals. Most people don't have real financial goals in terms of how much money they want to have to retire. And there's actually a way to figure out a ballpark number of how much money you're going to need in retirement based on your lifestyle. So we go through that. Week one is money mindset, goals, and whys. And that stuff is so important because if you map that out, then you're going to be more motivated to continue to make sure that you're learning what you need to hit that goal. So number one is money mindset. Week two, we talk about creating an intentional spending plan. And the simplest way to put this is figuring out how much money you can invest per month. So to do that, you need to understand your personal cash flow, how much money's coming in, how much money's going out. And now that you know how much money you want to have in retirement, we can actually reverse engineer how much you need to be contributing now to get to your goal. And if you don't have enough now to invest, then we can figure out what you need to change about your life to get there. So week two is simply just figuring out how much money you can invest per month. Week three is when we get to save on taxes. And really all that means is figuring out which retirement accounts are going to help you save on taxes. And there's so many options to do that, but that's a really good first place to start investing. And then retirement accounts are just containers for your investments, like a 401k or a Roth IRA. Those aren't investments in and of themselves, right? They're just containers that help you save on taxes. So in week four, we figure out simple investments that you can put in those containers to help grow your money. And so what I do is I teach you some very simple portfolios and share some sample portfolios and simple investments that anyone can learn about. We don't talk about picking stocks. We talk about choosing investments, funds that hold a bunch of different stocks at once that make it really easy. So those are the 4 steps. It's really 1, making sure you figure out your goals and whys, what's important to you. 2, your cash flow. How much money can you invest per month and how much money do you need to invest to reach retirement or hit whatever financial goal you have? Number 3 is taking opportunities to take advantage of saving on taxes with retirement accounts. And then 4, what do we put in the retirement accounts? And ironically, step 4, that's the piece that everyone gets nervous about, like choosing investments. But the great news about where we are in this day and age is that there's so many wonderful, super simple investments out there that make it really easy for you to create a super simple, diversified portfolio. So if you don't believe me, Google index funds and learn a little bit about that. But an index fund is basically just a fund that holds a bunch of different companies at once. So you can think about it as the variety pack of investing. So you don't have to worry about buying a specific stock and that one stock crashing. You can buy a fund that holds a bunch of different stocks, and then some of them are going to go up and some of them are going to go down. But over time, the stock market has trended in one direction, which is up. So index funds are a really great way to invest. And by the way, index just means list. This is one of those annoying financial jargony things. So if you've ever heard of the S&P 500 index, that's just a list of the top 500 largest US companies. And there's actually a fund that you can invest in called the S&P Index Fund that allows you to invest in those 500 companies. So that makes it a lot easier to choose investments to put into those retirement accounts. But those 4 steps are going to be so incredible. And if you just have one takeaway, just pick one, download the free guide. It'll be in the Savvy Investor Starter Pack in the show notes, and pick one of those things to learn a little bit about. And you'll be amazed how much you can improve your financial situation just by learning a little bit at a time. Arc for a while, and I was like, I'm just going to keep going because I think Riverside will collect it. I can hear you fine. It's not as clear, but I can hear you fine. Oh no. Is it windy down there? Mhm. Yeah. Cool. Okay, cool. Yeah, retirement account, saving on taxes with retirement accounts, and then choosing basic investments inside the retirement accounts. I just saw it come back on. Yay. All right. Now I can hear you again. Okay. I can see you. Maybe I can turn my camera off and on. Okay. 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 Cool. I can see you fine. So 100%. And in full transparency, when I started coaching beginner investing, I started with the tactical piece. And because that's what I had learned, I already had worked on my money mindset, but I didn't really realize it. And it took me no time at all. I think in my first like 2 months of business, right away, I realized that the hardest part of this wasn't learning the basics of investing. If you're open minded enough to realize, and I hope that this is a takeaway for you today, to give yourself a chance to learn the basics of investing. If you're open minded enough to do that, that's not the hard part. Learning how to create a simple portfolio that will work for you in a retirement account, that's not super hard. But what's really hard is making sure that one, you believe in yourself enough to believe that you can learn how to invest, that you can make enough money to be comfortable in retirement, that you deserve to have that money, that money is a tool that can help you buy independence, time, freedom, the ability to leave a toxic situation, whatever it is. Like money is so powerful and it's such a great tool to lead us to design the life we want to live. And so if you haven't done that work first, the money mindset piece, and then figured out what your cash flow is, it's not going to really help you to learn a lot about investing because you either won't be investing enough or you won't be making enough money or believe in yourself that you can be making enough money and can be investing enough for retirement. And it's going to be a lot harder for you to get there. So I couldn't agree more. I think that is always overlooked and you have to focus on the foundational pieces. It's like building a house without a foundation. You know, you can paint all you want, but if you have garbage walls and garbage frame, that's not going to be a great house. And that's really important when it comes to investing.
So if somebody wants to implement that, what we're learning right now, what advice would you give them of what they can do now to start and to implement exactly what they're hearing from you?
100%. So I'll give you two very specific things to look into. And if you Google these two things, you'll get tons of really great articles about this really quickly. So an index fund portfolio, as we've talked about, an index fund is a fund that buys and holds a whole bunch of different companies at once in one single fund. And so instead of buying single stocks, you can buy these index funds that hold a bunch of companies. So an index fund portfolio just holds a couple different index funds so you can make sure that your investments are invested across different things. That's what's called diversification. You'll hear like it's important to diversify your investments. What people mean when they say that is they want to make sure you are investing in the US stock market, in international markets, in different types of industries like consumer goods or technology. And that's when people go, oh my gosh, that sounds really complicated. But the great news is there are index funds that have all those things in one specific fund. So, two really simple ways to invest that I'll share with you that are index funds is one, there's something called a target date index fund. And that is an index fund that holds usually, not every time, but it holds US stocks, international stocks, and some bonds. So right there, you have a lot of what's called diversification, again, different types of investments in one fund. And those funds, if they're index funds, target date index funds, not target date mutual funds, sometimes have higher fees. So you want to look for a target date index fund. Those funds are great because at the end of those funds, there's usually a date. So it'll say the name of the target date index fund in 2040 or 2050. And if you choose an approximate date you think you're going to retire, then you can choose an index fund corresponding to that date. And then you're investing in all kinds of different stuff with one fund. So thousands of different stocks with one fund. So that's a super easy way to invest. And honestly, the target date index funds do really well because they're very diversified and they're super easy and you can just buy and hold it. And over time, it'll adjust to that date of retirement. So that's one of my favorite things. If you want to keep it super, super easy, that's a great one. The other thing you can Google after target date index fund is 3-fund portfolio. And it's kind of similar to the target date index fund we just talked about, but it has 3 different index funds. Typically, it has a US index fund. So it's investing in US companies you've heard of, like Facebook or Meta, rather, and Apple and Tesla and all that. And then you could choose an international index fund, would invest in different companies abroad. And then you could choose a bond index fund. And for those of you that don't really know the difference between stocks and bonds, stocks are a little bit more risky. So they will help you get higher returns over time, but they fluctuate more. And then bonds are a little more stable. They'll help you sort of level out your returns. Bonds are a whole different topic. I'm not going to go into all that right now. But both of those are really simple ways to invest that you could Google right now and get started with really quickly. So if you want to learn a little more about this, target date index funds and 3-fund portfolios are a great place to start if you want to learn more.
So Tess, thank you so much for being on the show today. How can people find out more about working with you and what you're up to?
Absolutely. So the first place I'll send you is the Savvy Investor Starter Pack that I mentioned. That guide has the 4 steps I talked about. It has some of the features of key retirement accounts that might be a good option for you. It even includes a list of questions to ask yourself to work on your money mindset that you can journal on. And then my favorite part of this, and this is the best part, is I include access to a video that has the 8 most common investing mistakes I see people make, most of which I have made, by the way. So that video is totally free and it's in the guide. So if you did nothing else but download the guide and watch that one video, you will learn a lot about what you can do to avoid big investing mistakes that most investors will make, but not you because you'll watch that video. So that's the best place to go, the Savvy Investor Starter Pack. That'll be in the show notes. And that's also at moneyconfidentcoach.com/savvy. And then also, if you want more resources, you can find me at Wealth with Tess on Instagram. And I'm always happy to share resources. I'm constantly sharing podcasts and books and all that stuff. So feel free to DM me over there. If you're a podcast person, I can send you podcasts. If you're a book person, all that stuff. But the guide, the Savvy Investor Starter Pack, is going to be the best place to start to take action today.
Thank you so much, Tess.
Thank you, Shannon. I so appreciate you.
Most accountants will try to bill you for those quick questions or make you feel like you're bothering them. And the truth is that the quick questions are what I love about what we do. That's why I created a new and accessible offer for you to be able to message me your questions and get the support you need when you need it. It's called the CFO On Demand. You can now get affordable help and access to me and my team without a high monthly fee. You can also upgrade and get access to a private one-on-one office hours to bring your specific strategies to the table. Want to learn more? Head to thecfoondemand.com or click the link in the show notes. Again, that's the CFO On Demand.